Hello, my name is Jeff Gemiello, and today I'd like to give an update. And actually, the topic today will be thinking differently. Um, Oddly enough, the Lord actually has told me over the last couple weeks and months to actually be quiet, not to say a word. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, actually, I got a couple messages hinting that I should probably put content out. Okay, so I'm doing that. But I'd like to give an update first, and the update actually is about my gang stalkers that have been stalking me for a while. It's actually been a whole month, if not a little bit longer, that I haven't seen them. So, good news is hopefully they healed. Um, you can only try so many times. I would also like to say that actually it's been a little while, but actually during the last full moon, during the day, actually one of the people that works at the local gas station that I frequent almost every day um, came creeping by the where I was sitting over here at the park, and she kind of like slithered by, in her car, kind of driving by, made sure she rolled the window down, and took a picture of me, and right, which was funny because it actually was the beginning of the full moon cycle. So I was like, okay, well, enjoy your karma on that one. Hopefully, you're not doing anything nefarious with it, but unfortunately, that brings up a very interesting point about people being obsessed with doing witchcraft and the likes. But they can do what they want. I have no control over that. Just understand that it's going to go bounce back because I did nothing to you. So we'll see how that works for you. Thinking differently at the topic. Basically, it's just spurred by a dream I had this morning, actually, which made me think. And the dream really, it's pretty simple dream. There's nothing really nefarious in it. And yes, my dog is going to probably pop his head into the window, pop his head into the screen. Yes. Well, this dream basically was me and a whole bunch of people, approximately about 5, sitting in chairs in front of a computer, kind of like in a row, looking at the computer. So basically, as they're talking, looks like they're talking through solving a computer problem, like they're writing some software code, and they're walking through, and then they're kind of talking it through, like, oh, we do this, then we kind of do that, and I made it kind of like a face, and then kind of like the camera has my back of my head, and these people, and then I kind of turn my head back, and I'm talking to somebody, and I say, can I help them? And the male voice behind me said, yeah, if you want. Oh, okay. And then I leaned back forward and I said, well, you may want to consider doing it a little bit differently. And I started to rail off, why don't you try doing, and then I woke up. Generally, that dream is pretty straightforward. Actually, it just indicates that I have, I guess, permission to kind of tell people how to think differently, is what I got out of that. You never know what the Lord wants, but I took that as maybe you should give them some alternatives, kind of ways to think. And I do have quite a bit of them in my life. But I said, it's a pretty straightforward dream. As much as it may be about computers, it actually is not about computers. Computers is just how I logically think. And I think that's what people need to start learning, start to, stop doing the kind of dumb things they keep doing. It's kind of like back in my day, people would just copy off of Google. And that's I'm coding, I'm copying off of Google. I go, how about you learn something? It's just, I don't know. We'll get to that later. But I'd like to give a story. It's a story about college. I went to college, but instead of going for computers, I actually went for business administration. The logic is that I already have an interest in computers. I'm already pretty good at writing programs. Why would I want to go to school and pay people to kind of reaffirm that when I can learn something new? I wanted to learn new things, not stuff I already know. A little bit arrogant, yes, but that is the reason why I went with business rather than computers. And I'll explain in a minute why it gets more twisted than that. But largely when I was in college, actually, I just came out of the military. I was in the Marines, no job to be had. So my only choice is to go into, I finally got accepted by a community college, and I said, okay, I can come in. And basically at that point, I was an adult learner, as they call it. So that means I have to take all the remedial classes, all the B-level classes because you didn't come from high school. And you had a 5-year detour in the Marines. Like you're going to lose all this education. God, whatever. So literally what ended up happening is that I had to take remedial classes because I was considered an adult learner, as I said. And because I didn't come right from high school, I had to take these classes. And these were, I thought to myself, well, maybe I need a refresher, One of them was a math class, and I swear to God, that they were teaching long division. And I go, whoa, how the hell are you here? I went and talked to the instructor, because the syllabus even says, business math, there's not much to business math. It's addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and maybe fractions. That's it. There's not a lot to it. Maybe a little bit of algebra, maybe. There's a formula here or there, and that's about it. There's not real complicated stuff. And basically, I basically told the instructor, I'm losing brain cells by being with these people. They're teaching them long division. And I went to go talk to the chair and said, I'm offended actually by this, because I was told I have to take this because my math might not have been good. I go, you learned long division in 6th grade. And basically he kind of said something that was kind of troubling, but I understand now why it is the way it is. Is largely if you were babysitting high school and they give you a piece of paper and your parents wanted you to go to college, the babysitting is going to continue when you go to college, and you're probably not going to get a degree anyway. So it's about money. But regardless, that kind of offended me a little bit. But some classes I did like. I took statistics. That was one of the electives I could take. I also took, I only had to take one computer class, and that was computer business applications. And I'm going to date myself, but that was literally WordPerfect and, WordPerfect and Lotus 1-2-3. And you literally it was tests on what are the shortcuts on the keyboard. So needless to say, it was a little offensive, but that's okay. I'm not going to use any of this because, oddly enough, I used to actually, where my stepfather used to work, I actually had a class or two taught a couple people on how to use WordPerfect. So it's not like I wasn't new to it. I already knew some of the shortcuts. How to bold something, how to unbold something, whatever. What really bothered me about the class actually was there was I don't like mental defect. And actually the instructor was very strict. It's kind of like you're back in the military again. It was very weird. It was very obnoxious. My stepfather liked him, so go figure that out. But really, this instructor would sit there and, I'll get to that in a minute. So largely throughout the class, the first half of the book was about how our computers put together, not necessarily electronic-wise, but here's a CPU, here's a mouse, here's a keyboard. I'm like, don't get me wrong, PCs have been out at least at that point about 8 years, 9 years. If you don't know what they are, you pretty much know what these are because you actually probably had them in high school. Most high schools actually had a computer or two in it. And you actually had to take a course in it. So even if it was kind of stupid, but you took the course. So for the most part, I would continue to raise my hand. Well, no, that's not right. This is what the real answer is. Because I work with this stuff all the time. I work with people, who work with the hardware side. So I know all that. And basically, I got a warning or two down to be kicked out of class. Whatever. So I got to behave myself because I just want to get out of this class. It's driving me crazy. And then literally, I got my work study. In work study, if I remember correctly, I had 10 hours a week. And literally, work study for me was me monitoring a lab, a computer lab, and helping people. Usually it was helping them, put their, format their disks or whatever, or helping them sometimes with their projects. And the good news is back at the time, it was only 2 classes really that used the labs. It was the CS people, which was learning C and C++, and the other staff was business people like myself, the business application class. It's like, okay, so one of the things I realized after all this is that, as you are helping people, like I would help people, goes, I got a problem, I can't figure this out. I go, well, you may want to try this. And I would walk away. And basically, it doesn't look right to me, why don't you try this? Mind you, I'm taking the same class. So I know exactly what the assignment is, I know all of this. And slowly but surely, I piece together the entire assignment because I'm helping people every day. So for literally, every assignment is like 2 weeks. And for this 2 weeks, I didn't do my assignment till the last minute because I already know what the answer is. I've been helping people with this all for 2 weeks. 20 hours I've been kind of technically working on it without touching a computer. So I've been thinking about it in my head of how this is going to work. But that's a skill that most people don't have that you probably need to try to develop because, hey, it works out really, really well when it does work for you. Because you work in pieces. I find that even now, like right now, actually I work on a computer maybe 2 or 3 hours a day, but I actually spend a good chunk of the day on and off thinking about what I'm going to do on the computer. And it actually makes it easier when I come to develop a plan on what I'm going to do, so that literally I can actually do work in 2 or 3 hours, do an 8-hour job, so to speak. And that's not a bad thing. It means you're getting more efficient at it, and also means I can spend more time with the dog. But regardless of that, the business application side of the fence, you used to print out your mistakes is what you do. And the instructor you had to have a folder and had to put all your work that you've done. And mine was always very lean because, it worked the first time. Because, I kind of solved this. And basically, he would give me Fs and everything because I'm not trying enough. I go, what do you mean not trying enough? That's the right answer. Or he wants to copy it from somebody. I'm in the lab working with these people. He didn't want to hear it. And I finally got ticked off at like the 2nd or 3rd downgrade of my stuff. I went to the department chair and said, hey, I don't like this instructor at all at this point. Because at this point, I'm getting, penalized for helping all the rest of your students. And basically, what they agreed to do was move me out of that class into another class, because that wasn't the only instructor that taught that. The other instructor didn't teach WordPerfect. It used, I believe it was Multimate. It was the competitor. It did a word processing program. It did a spreadsheet program, and it also did a database program. And that's what they would basically teach us in that class. And oddly enough, that's the same person that ran the computer store. We had just gotten a computer store in the school, and the instructor liked me. So what I got to do is I get to do 5 hours of work study watching this store. So I got to do all my homework for all my classes, really, while I was actually waiting for someone to actually buy a computer. And we were selling at the time PS2 computers, the really small ones, which are more business-like. And I said they're about $2 or $3 grand a piece, so that was kind of expensive. The good news is that we actually had a good discount. It was like 10 or 15% off. So when you look at it and say, well, I'm taking $200 off on a computer, that's not bad, especially when it's not official IBM. It's not like it's a compatible or anything. It was cheap. So, okay, so we eventually did buy a computer from them. But what finally made me actually get really ticked off and was the guy that used to critique me because my assignment wasn't as heavy as it was supposed to be. I got ticked off one day and I took a computer printout, someone else's source code of some program they were writing, and I threw it in there and then put my correct answer, and then I got a B. I go, you got to be crapping me. And I got upset, very upset, and that's when I went to the chair. I go, because you got to be kidding me. I wanted to audit the course. I go, because I taught WordPerfect, so it's not like I needed any of this. But they talked me into not doing that. So literally, even when I went to work at the computer store, my instructor said I only had to come in for tests. So every month or so, I had to come in for 1 hour to do the test, and that's it. I go back to the store, and he'd sign off on it because it's not like I didn't know any of this stuff. So that's where I got to understand that some people, it was a very weird experience. Some people were very particular on how they am. I swear that the guy must have been a drill instructor earlier in his life because he was very brash the whole time. I said, not to be confused with the math class. I said, long division. I don't know what to say about that one. But regardless, that is basically what I started at. One of the good things about college actually is you get to learn. Not everyone learns the same way, I guess you could say. Some people learn by doing, some people learn by seeing, some people learn by reading. Generally, what I've found effective is I will take a topic, regardless of whether it's a programming topic or otherwise. I will buy 3 different books, usually 3 different authors, read all 3, and find out what the commonality is between all of them. And that is, in my brain, correct. And it helps you understand the whole topic at that point. Throughout my life, literally when I worked at Westinghouse, we really didn't have any good internet. We had email. That was our only service. I got dumped onto the website project because there was a secretary that worked for us that said, oh yeah, I know how to make a website. And she made it all in Microsoft Word. And you can export it to HTML or whatever. And she took that, gave it to the boss, and the boss brought me in to figure out how am I supposed to deploy this? How am I don't understand what it's supposed to be doing because the whole purpose of the web is so you don't have to have Word on your machine to actually use, to look at this website. I'm like, what? What did she tell you? And I'm like, that doesn't sound right at all. I go, let me check something. And I went and looked, and that's all she did. She gave him a Word document, and literally the web server was just serving it to people who had Microsoft Word. I go, well, that's not how the web works at all. And then I got dumped onto, well, my boss, this is working for Westinghouse, mind you. We need to get an email because we went golfing and I didn't have an email address. What? Okay, whatever. So we actually got Buffalo Power. Buffalo Power was actually the domain that we actually had to get for our email. So we went and got that, and I was managing that. Then all of a sudden I inherited this website stuff. It's like, whatever. So at this point, I literally had to learn website from the ground up because that really was not part of my forte at the time. So at the time, I was doing COBOL work, software development work, and Visual Basic stuff for the company. And now at this point, I'm doing website work. And whenever in doubt, I went and pulled the standards. What does the standard say? Wow, there's a standard group? Yay! Let me pull the standard down. Let's see what the standards say. And I read it that way. Which, oddly enough, largely ticked off, my wife at the time because she would mimic people. So she would go online, steal someone's code, and just hack it up until it kind of did what she wanted. But it rarely ever did what she wanted. And it was just very frustrating. And then she'd bother me. Like, oh, why doesn't this work? Or, well, you're not doing that right. You can't do that. And she'd kind of get really upset with me because how dare I be smarter? And she knows the web more than me. It's like, well, whatever. I don't care. I don't really care. Okay. And that's not the first time I've actually had to walk away from something because people get upset because they don't like to hear what you have to say. Back to that college thing. My stepfather actually was going to take a class for work at that same school. It was on C and C++. And he actually paid for me to take that same class. I said I wasn't interested because I already know that. Why would I want to take it when I already know it? And basically he said, I'll pay for it. I'm like, fine. And I didn't really think too much into it other than, okay, well, it's just not, I'm not in college, I'm not in school anymore, but hey, you want me to go do it? Go ahead, I don't care. So we went to this class, and I actually found another guy that I was doing work with that did computer work, software development work. I would talk to him, and he was in the same class. It was one of the first times they've offered that class, is C and C++. So we're all kind of competing for the highest A. And literally, we would get home, and I said I lived with my stepfather and my mother at the time. So literally, it was like combat every time I came home, because it was like, why isn't this working? And I would go and say, you wrote it wrong. What do you want from me? He goes, well, I'm not used to playing with these toys. I'm used to playing with mainframes, with all this other stuff. And it's like, well, try it on a mainframe. I don't think it's going to work there either. And he was kind of like talking smack about how mainframes are so good, until he went and did it on a mainframe, that same code, and it blew up on a mainframe. It's like, as I said, it's not like it's just bad code. You read bad code. And my mother said, you two will never go to the same class ever again, because you just fight all day. Like, and basically my mother made a deal with me. I don't remember what my end of the deal was, but I agreed to it, that I would just be nice and help him, because he was driving her crazy. Like, threatening to kick me out and all kinds of things. It's like, it's your class. You learn, but it's like, no, well, I bit my tongue and said, okay, fine, I'll help you. And I helped him a little bit, and it's like, and then for years after that, it's like, oh, I know what I'm doing. Like, whatever, dude, I don't care. But it's another one where it's a very much of a different, just because you're not doing it the way they would want to do it. It's not right. And one thing you learn about software development is you can get 5 people in a room doing the same solution, and all 5 of them will look different completely. Doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means they'll look different. There's so much creativity in it. Regardless, what I was getting to with Buffalo Power is that routinely we had really nasty internet. So literally, you kind of got used to doing your work and everything without internet. Because that was back in the day of dial-up modems, by the way, people. That's old. We actually compromised, and we put together a Linux server to run 3 dial-up internet connections, so we could use more bandwidth. We finally got that running, like yay. And then finally, eventually, we got an ISDN line, which actually like quadrupled the speed, made it much faster. But regardless of that, you got used to thinking without having a reference. And one of the skills that I've learned is that as long as you know the basics, you can reason the rest of it out. It's not rocket science. All the computers is like that. If you know the basics, and you know the basics well, you can actually go over and say, okay, well, what would the next logical piece be to this? Because nothing happens in a vacuum. And people just kind of drift around in the standards of, hey, we added this and then we made this. And that's how software is written all the time. No different than engineering actually does the same thing. Once they find something new, they run with it. Which is interesting, because when I talk about no internet, it brings up 2 very interesting stories. My stepdaughters, which when they were young, now you're talking maybe 10 or 12 years old, they were exposed to the internet, and that was the best thing since sliced bread. Remember, back then, internet is social, Internet, like, I've never been on the social side of the fence because I don't really care. But literally, it's social. And one day our internet went down, and they came over to complain to me, and they're like, well, why is your computer still working? I go, because I'm using the internet. I go, it goes from the brain into the keyboard. It doesn't, I don't go on the internet, look for things. Well, that's not right. It also brings up another interesting story. The other interesting story about no internet is actually when I worked at East Coast Millworks. We had a Barracuda or some kind of crazy internet device. It died. It just keeled over and died one day. And it was so terrible. It did our email and everything. So it kind of died, and it was a small company. So basically at that point, it's like they couldn't figure out why I was still being productive. I'm like, I don't use the internet for any of that stuff. So it's all the resources are local. Why, what am I needed for? To look things up? I go, if you can't figure out with a telesense what things are doing, you got issues. Oddly enough, actually, my stepdaughters had all kinds of issues with internet. We used to actually shut them down at 10 o'clock at night, or 8 o'clock at night, or 10 o'clock at night. It would drop the internet off for them completely, and would resume the next morning at like 6 or 7 o'clock. That's so they get some proper sleep, because we found out a couple times that they were not doing what they were supposed to doing, and they were not sleeping either. So they would spend all night, doing their thing. It didn't necessarily bother the adults, but it did bother them. Usually over the years, I have learned how to connect dots a lot. And a lot of the connecting dots is you start out in one spot, and as you get more information, you move on. I've always told employers that if you tell me where you want to go, I will drag the code there, and you will be there in a year or two. Because people don't realize that we make decisions all the time, whether it be software or whether it be in your business. If you tell someone where you want to go, they should be able to help you, make better decisions. Because if you don't tell a person where you want to go, it's like, well, what's the easiest one for me to do? Like, well, we don't always do the easiest thing. Sometimes it's like, okay, you want to go to the cloud. If you think about what do I need to go to the cloud, I need this, and this. Okay, so when I make decisions, I want to favor going that way versus going this way. And that's what people forget, and that's why people have a lot of problems. It's like, oh, it's just whatever the simplest thing. So it's kind of a very bizarre and weird thing. And it's not getting any better. Actually, I've seen a lot of people get worse about that than get better. And you mention it to them, and they kind of get very defensive about it. Like, I'm sorry if I'm interfering with your process, but just like a lot of times, I generally do not like Scrum. I like Agile, but I hate. I do not like Scrum. Scrum is a level of bureaucracy that you only get with Waterfall, and you just inherited some more of it because hey, they wanted some controls. What's really bizarre about it is there was a study done out, and almost all projects that are Agile fail for the simple fact that there's no deliverables anymore because you're in the unknown. In Agile world, you can break anything down you want. They forget that Agile means you react to change. And they forget that. They look at it as from a scheduling perspective, and it's like there's nothing to do with a schedule. It is it going to work or is it not going to work? Example, you have a 6-month project. They deemed it to be 6 months on a project. They spec'd it all out, and you find out after a month that, yeah, you're basically cutting and pasting the same stuff over and over, and instead you just make a template, make a generation program that does that, and you basically just take it, and now instead of taking 2 or 3 weeks per program, it takes 20 minutes, okay? And now at this point, your boss refuses to take it to management because, oh, we need the buffer for all this other stuff. And it's like, yeah, but I'd rather do stuff that's important. And what you're telling me now at this point is, if I can cut and paste all this stuff, it's not important at all. You're solving the wrong problem. And that's what people kind of like to stay in that little happy zone of, I want to make sure the project's on time. I would rather go to the business unit and say, hey, we said we're going to take 6 months, but we actually got it done in 3 weeks. Because do you want to know what's going to happen? I will guarantee you, they're going to run it and they're going to find a change that they want to fix in it. Guaranteed. That's usually how it works. I've never worked in a place that actually had good specs at what they wanted. I'd hit it back. I did work for Snap, state of Indiana, and literally they overspec'd everything so badly that I looked at this and said, how do I take this and just cut and paste it from this electronic document and make code out of it? I was thinking of it. I said, nah, I'm not going to do that. I took the opposite approach actually at that place. I actually said, okay, well, if it's going to be this kind of dumb, and they expected me to have it done in 3 months. I got what they wanted done actually in like 4 days. So it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Because I'm still being paid. I still have to, be there for changes and everything else. I'm still getting paid for all this, the time. So I decided that, hey, I'm going to write a compiler for this then. Make my own language to make it easier to do this, because I noticed even in my code, like, hey, there's an easier way I could do this. So I went and took that route, kind of went rogue and did that. And I was in the middle of that before I left that job. But it's like, it could have easily went that route. And at this point, you have a new language to deal with, so you don't have to deal with all this boilerplate stuff all over the place. But a lot of businesses do that right now, and it's actually quite terrible. So this was all about actually teaching them about how to think differently. One of the things I could say is you got to learn how to connect dots a lot, because you'll hear pieces of things. I hear that a lot of pieces here and there, and I put them together to see if it'll work and see if it won't work, regardless of whether it's computers or it's engineering. Right now, to be honest with you, the computer profession has a problem. You got ChatGPT breathing down your neck, and ChatGPT, from the computer programming perspective, is a 5-year-old. It has no trauma, so it can. There's nothing really weird about it other than it can do whatever you tell it to do before, it'll do. I go, that's fine, great and fine. So if you make an example of it and it can go over and generate all this stuff you want to do, I go, but are you really solving the right problem? Because, to be honest with you, you're probably not. But I said, I've learned over the years to connect the dots and always have multiple plans in place. And usually, if you're pretty good at what you do, practice makes perfect. They keep telling you that practice makes perfect. They're not joking about that. If you start thinking different ways, you have different points of view. Example is I usually run a whole rack server at home so I don't destroy computer hardware that belongs to the company. I mimic everything that I want to do at home because, hey, if I get to work there, yay, I got your system down now. At this point, I know how to work on your system. It also works the opposite way, too. That also means I'm gathering knowledge on how to build all these complex systems on the home hardware. If you think that's stupid, but what do you think your next step is for computer programming? It's making systems and directing systems. So you got to know how all that stuff goes together. I cannot stress enough about the basics. If you know the basics, the rest takes care of itself. I really can't stress that enough. With Google, my day used to be Google. People just copy Google and just cut and paste it into their code. They don't know what it does. But one day what happens is that it breaks. Something goes wrong and it breaks. And now at this point, you're spending hours upon hours upon hours figuring out why a piece of code that you didn't write doesn't work. I've always had the opinion of you don't trust anything that you don't understand that came off the internet. Because you don't know what it's doing. The algorithm could be right, it could not be right. You could be, for all that you know, it's transferring your bank account information. You never know. Or it could be it could be planting a virus somewhere. You don't know. You can reasonably say that that's not what the code's doing, but I've always been on the safety side and used caution. It doesn't mean I don't go over and try to mimic things and try to see what I can do. More recently, I've been trying to mimic things regarding AWS. I like how something worked, and let me see if I can do that in .NET without AWS. Make that kind of system, and that's how you get experience. And most people don't realize that. Very recently, I gave someone some advice, and the advice was, just because you're not paid to do something doesn't mean you can get experience. And I say that because when I first got the job at Buffalo Power, the only experience I had with COBOL literally was reading books and trying to write an adventure game on a mainframe in my father's company. Where my father worked, not his company, but the company he worked for. And so, every couple nights I would come in there and manually type stuff in, to get it to work. So it was trial and error. And when I went to go interview, I was like, well, I know about it. And he goes over and says, well, do you know COBOL or not? I go, well, I was never paid. I know how to do things because I read the books. I know, and I've patched together other people's stuff on how to do it. He goes, yeah, but it doesn't matter if you got paid or not. It's just you have the experience regardless. And I remind people that just because you're not paid doesn't mean you shouldn't try. The person I was referring to actually was in the artistic realm. And they were kind of getting upset because no one wants to, hire them. I go, myself, if no one wants to buy software from me, that's fine. I will continue to write software for myself because it's a learning experience. One day someone's going to say, hey, Jeff, what software do you have? Here's my portfolio. Wow, we can make some software out of this. Enjoy. How much do you want? A couple million. Here you go. And But that's how software works. It's very weird. And that's how actually most things work. Just like a lot of times when you have passion for what you're doing, you will put an obscene amount of energy in it. There's no 40 hours on passion. When you want to do something, it bothers you until you get it done right, and you will continue to do it. And that's a good thing, actually. As much as it may waste your time, as they like to call it, I go, it's not, because you are learning something each and every day about it. And you generally don't see those for people who actually go and get the computer classes in college. They generally have no passion for what they're doing whatsoever. It's a job. And in this market, you're going to find out that it's going to be harder and harder for people to get a job. But people who have passion in it, they're going to have a real good time, because you can smell them out when you're talking to them if they have passion for what they do. The people with that passion make you a lot of money. Trust me, especially as a developer. But that is something, as I said, I had to clarify, because it doesn't just apply to computers. As I said, you have a portfolio, exercise the portfolio. No different than if I wanted to paint today. I said I want to go paint. I have to learn. I'm gonna have a lot of crappy paintings. I go, but over time it'll get better and better, because I'm perfecting my skills if that's what I really want. A lot of times we try once or twice, like, I don't want to do it. That's fine, and maybe you didn't want to do it. But if you don't try, you don't know. So I definitely encourage everyone to try. I encourage everyone to think differently. Challenge yourself. Is there a way I can do this, without using this way here? That's an engineering thing. Engineering does it all the time. How do I do this without a pulley? How do I do this without a relay? Find out. It may be the next best thing. You never know. But that's all I have to say today, and thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day. Have a blessed day.